Welcome to another edition of Question and Answer with a Criminal Defense Attorney. I'm Mark Solomon, a defense attorney in Denver, Colorado, and today's question is about resisting arrest and obstruction of a peace officer. But before we get started, don't forget to click like on this video and the subscribe button with a little bell next to it to be notified of future videos. What is resisting arrest and what is obstruction of a peace officer? These two charges go kind of hand in hand. Obstruction of a peace officer can happen at any time, whereas resisting arrest has to happen before somebody's arrested. Let's look at the statutes of each one of them and talk about that. So obstruction, I've highlighted some parts of it, but basically obstructing a peace officer is using or threatening to use force or violence, physical interference, or an obstacle. Knowingly, the person has to knowingly obstruct, impair, or hinder the enforcement of a penal law. I'm going to skip the rest of it. You can read it. I'll leave it up there while I talk about it. Basically, anytime you do something, especially using force, when a peace officer is trying to do something, you can be charged with obstruction. Think a peace officer, a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, state trooper, they have the ability to do something and you're getting in their way, right? They want to go in to check on the welfare of somebody and they have a right to do it and you block the door. That's obstruction. That's a literal obstacle. Also, if you use words to say, no, somebody's not here when there are. Now, there's a few charges, but this has come up in cases that I've done where somebody has lied to the police. If you don't lie to the police, I can't imagine a situation where you can be charged with obstruction. In other words, refusing to talk to a peace officer is something that you have a right to do. But if they ask you questions, you don't respond because you don't want to talk to them, and you say, I'm not answering your questions. That's not something that I've ever seen or heard anybody being charged with obstruction for. It's different if you don't tell the truth. So sometimes this can be refusing to get on the ground. Sometimes, when they're doing an arrest. In other words, something that hinders their ability to enforce the law, which is a fairly broad thing. But let's shift gears and talk a little bit about resisting arrest. This is a lot more straightforward, and this is where you have to knowingly prevent or attempt to prevent a person who is making arrest, a police officer, from making arrest, and you're using force or the threat of force to do it. Or, Section B, any other means which creates a substantial risk of causing bodily injury to the peace officer or another. So in other words, if police officers are arresting your friend and you try to stop them, you've just committed this resisting arrest. And again, it's more broad, and I've done a number of these cases where it's easy for a police officer or a district attorney prosecuting the case to be able to justify that something you do that gets in the way of a police officer making an arrest could cause substantial risk of causing bodily injury to anybody. That's the peace officer or another. So in other words, you're trying to stop your friend from getting arrested. Well, guess what? Maybe they're going to use more force on your friend. That's resisting arrest too. Okay. The reason I put Section 2 up here, and this is really important in Colorado, this Section 2 of the resisting arrest statute says that you have no right to resist an unlawful arrest. So in other words, if it turns out the officer is arresting you and he does not have a good reason to do it, that doesn't change the fact that you can still be charged and convicted of resisting arrest, because an unlawful arrest is not a defense to resisting arrest. Very important there. Okay, so you've got obstruction on one side, resisting arrest on the other. Oftentimes people are charged with both. So, it's good to know what to avoid doing. Now, next question is, what are the penalties for this? So both resisting arrest and obstruction are Class 2 misdemeanors, which means they are punishable by up to 12 months in jail. That's not good. Don't do either of those things. So that is the question and answer for today. If you would like your own questions for future videos, you can put it in the comments below, email it to me, or tag me on Twitter. And as always, and I even mentioned in this video, if a police officer asks you questions about what you've done, what you know, what you have, or anything, you have a right to say, I don't want to answer your questions. And if he persists, I want a lawyer.